guys, so in today's video I thought I would talk about books I read while I was in grad school. So just a quick little background. I got my bachelor's back in 2019 and I graduated with my master's in English in the summer of 2020, and I think I took a total of about 10 classes. I took about 10 classes in a year. I did more than recommended, and I think if I would go back, I would probably take less classes and kind of take my time and explore the material more, and maybe do some research opportunities if those were possibilities. I did an online program because of where I was located at the time, and then because, you know, COVID happened mid-semester, mid-year, so that kind of also came into play because I was going to go on ground to do my thesis and kind of research, but that was not possible. I really enjoyed the classes and the literature we explored, so I thought I would just talk about three of the books that I read during my graduate school career. So these books are from my Southern American literature, or Indigenous, or kind of just American literature in general. And I really enjoyed the class I took on Southern literature because I was born and raised in Florida, and then I moved out of the continental US when I was a teen, and I kind of lost that connection with what it meant to be from the South. And the books like that I read for graduate school, and then books I would later go on to read, like Where the Crawdads Sing by Celia Owens, are kind of a nice way to connect with your history. I think more people should read books about where they're from, especially when it is a novel, because we kind of get to hear this presentation of how someone else, if they either grew up there or didn't, view our culture and our own home narrative, and kind of get to see another view of what we think we know. So the first book I want to talk about is Oyster by John Bignette. So this is a book that is set in Louisiana in 1957 and recounts the tale of the deadly rivalry between families. That they're oyster farmers, basically. And it covers themes like class, gender, and murder. And this book, you're on kind of the edge of your seat this whole time, because we get this presentation of these very hyper-masculine characters and their own ideas about what it means to be a man, and that and their view of property, and kind of how those ideas come into play once you have the competing families, and what happens when there's a daughter or that you're out of money, and kind of the changing of tides, both metaphorically and physically, with the oyster farming. And it's this great interaction of community that we get to see with these characters' interactions, and kind of everyone knowing each other but then not really knowing anyone at all. And I thought it was a really great read. It really makes you think about these characters and how makes you really think about the setting, and how much of the class interaction between these societies is because of ecological forces. The next book is Solar Storms by Linda Hogan. So at 17, Angela returns to an island town between Canada and Montana to discover there are plans for a hydroelectrical dam that would flood sacred land. So this book covers themes of gender, class, cultural clashes, and colonialism and modern colonialism, which is something I think, especially I forget that colonialism isn't something that's over. We have pieces of literature called post-colonial works, but is anything really post-colonial? Is that something that's even possible for something to be post-colonial? If you think about how in England, how Roman texts are still used as reference, Romans colonized England at one point, and it's still a large cultural influence. So this book is something that I think reminds the reader of how our own cultural forces can influence how we interact, especially with our environment and our communities, and kind of focusing on what's important versus what's easy. And I really enjoyed that. Then the last book I'm going to talk about today is Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. So this book follows Janie, a Black woman in the 1930s, through her 3 marriages and her bid for security and respect with cultural repercussions in the eyes of her peers. So Their Eyes Are Watching God. This is a book I took a special liking to by Hurston, and it is one that I ended up doing my end thesis work on. So I wrote about 40 pages on Hurston's use of pears in her work, and like the idea of fruit with femininity in Southern culture in the United States. And this book really makes you focus on what a woman has to do to survive within her community when everybody is always looking down at her for using her sexuality and her own feminine power to advance herself. They're jealous of her because she's doing what they can't because they don't meet those societal beauty standards. And I thought like that conversation was something that's very impressive and something I think is going on still today. So if you would go on TikTok and you would see this woman who is sexualizing herself, all the comments are of men who are disparaging her. But they're the same people who enjoy watching those videos. They were put on their page to be viewed for a reason. So it kind of brings that whole idea of the viewer and the viewed, and who's really presenting themselves for who when it comes to that. So those were some of the books I read in graduate school. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Bye!